Hello everyone. For our design project, we decided to create multi-sided dice through sand casting. The dice range from 4-sided to 20-sided. Throughout this video, you will see our entire process from building the foundry to polishing our finished dice. We hope you enjoyed this tutorial and learned something new about casting and its capabilities. Casting dates back to 5000 BCE and has developed into a manufacturing process with a multitude of different techniques and strategies to achieve virtually limitless shapes with high form freedom. For our project, we chose to use sand casting since it's relatively simple and can be done with at-home tools and a trip to Home Depot. We had to brainstorm to determine the method we wanted to use for making the mold and cleanly removing the dice without disrupting the sand. We decided to go with a method done by a YouTuber named Molten Metal Casting. We included the link to his video in our description. He uses the dice themselves to set the mold and utilizes small brushes and scrapers to carefully remove the dice, then finally connects them with small gates, as you will see us do further in the video. Once we had our method picked out, it was time to get work on the forge. After some research, we landed on a popular video done by the King of Random. He created a DIY mini metal foundry. His detailed step-by-step video is also linked in the description. To start, we went to Home Depot and purchased the items seen here. First, we combined the plaster of Paris and sand into a Home Depot bucket and added water. Once we mixed this together and had the right consistency, it was time to pour this mixture into our 10-quart metal bucket. Once poured, we filled our smaller bucket with water and let it sit in the mixture for an hour. Once this dried, we removed the plastic bucket, leaving a cavity that will hold our crucible and fuel. While this was drying, we also made a foundry lid with the same mixture in a smaller bucket, making sure to leave a hole to fit cans. We also inserted 2 U-bolts as handled while the lid was drying. Now that everything was dried, it was time to create our vent hole. We were able to drill a hole through the side of the bucket angled downward towards the bottom of the cavity. This will hold our steel tube that feeds air into the foundry. Once the hole was set, it was time to get our crucible. Our original crucible was made out of the bottom half of a fire extinguisher, since these are the right shape and made out of steel. As we soon found out, this crucible was too large for our foundry and caused there to be too small gaps to fit our fuel. Because of this, we purchased a smaller graphite crucible on Amazon. Now that we had the crucible, we were ready to move to the sand mold. We made our own casting sand out of play sand and kitty litter. Using a strainer, we sifted the sand to remove any particulates. We did the same with the kitty litter to get the clay. Once the sand and clay were sifted out, we slowly added water until we had the right consistency of strength for our sand casting. The casting process started with laying sand in our case. We used spare wood to make a packing tool that we used to tightly pack our sand. Once we got to a decent halfway point, we carefully pushed the dice into the sand, being mindful of the shape and making sure not to have any negative overhangs where the sand would be disrupted. Along with the dice, we also included a central puck that would allow the metal to flow from bottom up. With the dice firmly in the sand, we continued to pack in sand on top to make sure that they wouldn't move around while we finished the mold. A layer of baby powder was applied to the top to reduce the risk of the mold not separating post-cast. The second half of the case was put on and packed with sand. Once all packed, we carefully separated the 2 halves of the case and started to remove the dice. This took time and patience to avoid any sand from being disrupted. The puck and dice were removed, and we dug small channels from the central puck to each die. Finally, we used a wooden dowel to create a sprue that connected to our puck. With all of these aspects finished, it was time to put the case back together and melt some metal. We set up our foundry in the position shown, being mindful of the surrounding area. The steel ventilation tube is attached to a PVC pipe which has a leaf blower and funnel at the other end. Having the blower at its lowest setting allowed a steady flow of air that fueled the forge. As the forge started to heat up, we were able to start feeding in cans. Alan was the one who operated the foundry because he had all of the proper safety gear that was outlined in the foundry safety document. After about 10 minutes of melting cans, we were ready to cast. Carefully, we used steel pliers to pour the melted aluminum out of the crucible and into the mold. After about 20 minutes of cooling, we separated the case to reveal our finished cast. After removing the cast from the sand, we cut each die off and cooled them in water. We were left with roughly the right shape of dice. We later brought these to the Fab Lab to file, sand, and Dremel in the numbers. Overall, we are happy with our set of multi-sided dice. We learned a lot about the proper techniques of casting, as well as some things to watch out for in the future. Our first pitfall came from the foundry. We had to make 3 separate lids since they either broke or cracked. This could be due to rapid heating and cooling. Our second was making sure we had enough heat to melt the metal. It is important to pause and refuel the coals in order to keep the metal heated. Finally, we could not get the Dremel to engrave our dice numbers correctly, so we resorted to a punching technique which left them not as consistent as we may have wanted. However, in the end, we were left with smooth, playable, and 100% aluminum dice. Thanks for watching.